My brother married my ex-wife, then begged me not to tell the family what I knew. I need to write this down because for almost 2 years my family treated me like the bitter divorced guy who could not accept that his ex-wife had moved on, while the truth was sitting in a locked drawer in my apartment, packed into folders full of fake invoices, bank transfers, signed admissions, private messages, medical records, and one wedding video clip that still makes my stomach turn every time I think about it. My ex-wife's name is Megan, my younger brother's name is Ryan, and the version of the story my family wanted to believe was simple enough for people to repeat without feeling dirty. Megan and I had grown apart. The divorce had hurt everyone. Ryan and Megan had somehow reconnected after the separation. Love had happened in a complicated way, and I was supposed to be mature enough to accept that 2 adults had found happiness, even if one of those adults was my brother, and the other had been my wife for almost 8 years. That version was clean, emotional, and convenient, which is exactly why it was a lie. The real story started before the divorce, before their engagement, before the wedding, and before my mother stood in a church crying like God had personally repaired our broken family, because long before Ryan married Megan, the 2 of them had already been sleeping together, stealing from my father's company, hiding money from each other, and building a future that required me to stay quiet, useful, and stupid. I was the oldest son in my family, which meant I had been trained from childhood to handle stress, like it was my natural climate. Always there, always absorbing it, never supposed to complain because everyone had decided I was the stable one. My father owned a small construction company that he had built from nothing, and after his health started getting worse, I stepped in more and more to help with payroll, vendor payments, insurance renewals, tax documents, supplier calls, and all the boring, ugly work that keeps a family business alive while everyone else just says they are proud of it. Ryan never helped unless there was a camera, a free meal, or a reason to ask for money, but somehow my parents still looked at him like he was one good decision away from becoming the man they had always imagined. He was charming in that useless, dangerous way, the kind of man who could borrow money, miss payments, forget birthdays, lose jobs, break promises, and still make people feel cruel for expecting basic decency from him. Megan used to tell me I was too hard on him, that not everyone handled pressure the way I did, and that Ryan just needed someone to believe in him, which sounds harmless until you realize your wife has already started believing in your brother in ways a wife should not. The first hard proof came from a vendor file. I was reviewing company statements late one night after my father had another health scare, and I noticed several payments going to a consulting company called Blue Harbor Solutions, which sounded normal enough until I opened the invoices and saw vague descriptions, rounded amounts, repeated formatting errors, and dates that lined up perfectly with weeks when my father had been dealing with doctors, and nobody was watching the books closely. At first I thought it was sloppy admin work. Then I thought it might be a vendor overbilling us, but after a few hours of searching, I realized the money was leaving my father's company through fake invoices and landing near an address connected to Ryan's apartment building. The amount was not small either, because by the time I tracked the pattern, more than $60,000 had moved through those fake invoices. And the sick part was that some of those payments happened during weeks when Ryan had borrowed money from me for rent, groceries, and a car repair he claimed would ruin him if nobody helped. That is a special kind of humiliation, realizing you helped someone survive while they were robbing your father behind your back. I did not confront him immediately because Ryan had spent his whole life turning accusations into emotional hostage situations, and I knew if I walked in with anger instead of evidence, he would cry, deflect, drag my mother into it, mention my father's heart, and somehow make the whole family talk about my tone instead of his theft. So I kept digging. That was when Megan's name started showing up in places it should not have been. She had helped with bookkeeping for my father's company part-time. And at first I had been grateful because I thought my wife was helping my family while I was overloaded. But the more I searched, the clearer it became that she had not just noticed the fake vendor activity, she had helped structure it. There were invoice templates saved under her admin folder, email drafts from her laptop, calendar notes that matched payment dates, and one bank notification on an old tablet she had forgotten was still connected to her cloud account. The notification led to a private account I had never heard of, and that account showed transfers that did not make sense for a married woman who kept telling me we needed to be more careful with money. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with the laptop open while Megan slept upstairs, and for the first time in my marriage I understood that I was not discovering one betrayal, I was discovering a system. People talk about cheating like it is one dirty bedroom, one bad night, one weak moment, but real betrayal is usually administrative before it becomes dramatic because it has passwords, bank transfers, deleted messages, fake errands, calendar gaps, and people who kiss you goodbye while mentally moving money into their exit fund. When I finally confronted Megan, I still wanted to believe she had been pressured by Ryan, because apparently even when the evidence is sitting in front of you, part of your brain still tries to protect the person who has been lying beside you. She cried too early, before I even showed her everything, and that should have told me she was not shocked by the accusation, only scared by how much I had found. She said Ryan had debts, that he had panicked, that she had helped him once and then it got out of control, that she meant to put the money back, and that she had not told me because I would overreact. That word stayed with me because people who steal from your family love acting like your anger is the real emergency. Then I asked if she was sleeping with him, and she did not answer quickly enough. That was when my marriage ended for me, not when the divorce papers were filed, not when she moved out, not when a judge signed anything, but in that silent delay where my wife looked at the floor instead of my face. The affair had been going on for almost a year, according to the first version she gave me, though I later learned that almost a year was just the smallest piece of truth she thought I could prove. Ryan came to my house that night after Megan called him, and the first thing I noticed was that he did not look ashamed enough. He looked scared, yes, but not ashamed, because Ryan had always been more afraid of consequences than of hurting people. He begged me not to tell our parents, and he wrapped that begging in every noble excuse he could find, saying Dad's heart could not take it, Mom would break, the company would suffer, the money could be repaid, Megan and I could divorce quietly, and if I exposed everything, I would be the one destroying the family. That was the night I understood that selfish people do not just avoid consequences, they recruit you to help protect them from consequences by making your honesty look cruel. I wanted to destroy him immediately, and I wanted to drive to my parents' house at midnight, wake them up, put the invoices on the table, and make Ryan explain how he could steal from a sick father while sleeping with his brother's wife. But my father had just been through a medical scare. My mother was already fragile, and I knew that if I dropped everything at once, the truth would turn into an emotional fire where everyone screamed, cried, and forgot the documents. So I made a colder decision. I kept quiet, but I made them sign things. Megan signed a private divorce settlement that tied her to repayment terms and documented her role in the fake vendor scheme, while Ryan signed a separate repayment agreement through my lawyer. And although neither document felt like justice, they gave me something more useful than revenge in that moment. They gave me leverage. The divorce went through months later, and because I refused to explain the full truth publicly, Megan got to perform the sad divorced woman routine, while Ryan pretended to be the supportive brother caught in the middle. She told people I was emotionally unavailable, that I cared more about work than marriage, that she had been lonely for years, and that sometimes two good people just grow in different directions. Ryan sat at family dinners with soft eyes and a careful voice, acting like he was worried about both of us. My mother told me I should not be bitter. My father told me divorce was rarely one person's fault. I sat there eating dry chicken while the man who had slept with my wife passed the salt across the table and asked me if work was busy. There is a level of disrespect that does not make you explode because it is too big for one reaction. It changes your personality instead. For about a year, I let them think they had survived it, because once the repayment paperwork was signed, I realized something important. People like Ryan and Megan do not stop because they got away with something. They escalate. Ryan announced he was dating Megan at my mother's birthday dinner, which was so obscene I almost admired the cruelty of the timing. He gave a speech about how they had reconnected after the divorce, how nobody planned it, how they had resisted their feelings, and how they knew it would be complicated, but hoped the family could eventually accept that love does not always arrive neatly. Complicated is one of those words people use when honest words would make them look disgusting. Everyone looked at me first because they knew this needed my reaction to become socially acceptable, and I could almost feel my mother praying that I would be generous enough to make the room easier for everyone. I did not raise my voice. I told Ryan that I hoped he knew exactly what he was marrying. That one sentence was enough to ruin his night because he called me 7 times before midnight and left messages asking what I meant, even though both of us knew exactly what I meant. A few months later, they got engaged, and that was when Ryan came to my apartment looking like a man who had finally realized the body he buried might still have a pulse. He begged me not to tell the family what I knew, because Megan wanted a real wedding, Mom was finally happy, Dad was proud of him for settling down, and if I exposed them now, everyone would think I was doing it out of revenge. Then he told me Megan was pregnant. That was supposed to be the emotional kill switch. He knew my family, and he knew that once there was a baby involved, everyone would start choosing the soft lie over the hard truth, because grandparents want ultrasound photos more than they want bank records. But the pregnancy did not sit right with me. Ryan said she was 12 weeks along, but I knew from settlement compliance records and one careless email that Megan had taken an out-of-state trip around the same time the pregnancy would have started, and when my lawyer reviewed the financial activity connected to her private account, we found a payment to a clinic, then a payment to a private investigator. At first I thought she had hired the investigator to follow me, which would have been insane but not surprising, but the report summary showed she had hired him to follow Ryan. Megan had been checking whether Ryan had hidden another Blue Harbor-related account from her, and the answer was yes. Ryan had stolen from my father with Megan, then stolen from Megan, then tried to marry her while begging me to protect both of them. That should have been the most ridiculous twist, but it was not. The investigator had also photographed Megan meeting another man at a hotel 2 weeks before the engagement party. The man was not Ryan. He was Ryan's old gambling friend, Cole, a guy who had been around years earlier and had suddenly disappeared after Ryan owed him money. That was when the pregnancy stopped being a shield and started looking like another weapon. I did not know if the baby was Ryan's, Cole's, or part of a story Megan was using to lock Ryan into marriage before he realized she had options, but I knew enough to understand that everyone around me was lying to everyone else. That was the trashiest part of the whole thing. They were not 2 tragic lovers who had hurt people because their hearts were confused. They were 2 scammers trying to scam each other while using my family as a stage. I told Ryan that if he wanted my silence before the wedding, he needed to repay every dollar connected to my father's company. He admitted most of the money was gone, not invested, not frozen, not waiting to be recovered. Gone. Gambling debts, rent, cash withdrawals, a car he could not afford, hotel rooms, gifts for Megan, and one engagement ring that had apparently been bought with money stolen from the same father who cried when he saw it on her finger. I almost told everyone before the wedding. I almost opened everything and let the whole circus burn. But then I realized that if I exposed them before the ceremony, Ryan and Megan would become victims of my timing. My mother would beg for peace. My father's health would become the center, and everyone would pressure me to let the wedding happen because the baby needed stability. So I waited. I went to the wedding. I wore a suit, sat in the 3rd row, watched my brother marry my ex-wife in front of a family that thought I was being cold, and listened while my mother cried during vows that were basically a fraud, spoken over flowers. People kept glancing at me, waiting for the bitter ex-husband to break character and make a scene, but I did not give them that gift. A scene would have helped Ryan. It would have turned documents into drama and theft into heartbreak. I sat still because I was not there to forgive them. I was there to watch them finish building the lie. At the reception, Ryan tried to hug me, and I let him stand there with his arms halfway open until the silence embarrassed him enough to drop them. Megan avoided my eyes, which told me she understood something Ryan did not. She knew I was not empty. I was waiting. Then the wedding became worse than anything I had planned. The first part was almost normal, at least if you ignore the fact that the groom had stolen from his father and the bride had cheated with her ex-husband's brother because people danced, drank, smiled for photos, and pretended the room did not have a corpse of truth under the floorboards. Ryan drank too much. That was not unusual for him, but the difference was that this time he was drunk on attention too, moving through the reception like he had won something, putting his hand on Megan's waist too hard, laughing too loud, pulling her close whenever someone took pictures, and acting like the whole room had finally approved the lie he had built. Megan looked tense, and I noticed it because I had been married to her long enough to know the difference between happy nervous and trapped nervous. Later, one of the venue cameras and 2 phone videos filled in what I did not personally see. Megan had pulled Ryan into a side hallway near the kitchen, apparently because she wanted him to stop drinking and stop telling people that my father would soon make him a partner in the company, which was stupid because he was saying it before anyone had actually agreed. Ryan got angry. He was drunk, embarrassed, and probably scared that Megan would ruin the polished version of himself he had been performing all night. In the video, you can see him grab her arm and pull her back when she tries to walk away. Not some cinematic attack, not a punch, not anything he could not later try to explain away, but enough force to make her lose balance in heels near the short set of service steps. She fell. The video does not show much after that, and I am glad it does not, because the sound was bad enough. People rushed into the hallway, someone screamed for an ambulance, and within minutes the wedding reception had turned from fake happiness into chaos, with music still playing too softly in the background because nobody had thought to shut it off yet. Megan was taken to the hospital in her wedding dress. She lost the pregnancy that night. I am not going to describe it like some revenge scene because it was not satisfying, and anyone who thinks a miscarriage is a satisfying twist is probably dead inside. It was awful. My mother was sobbing in a hospital waiting room with mascara down her face. My father sat like a stone with both hands on his cane. Ryan kept saying it was an accident, and Megan refused to let him into her room once she was awake enough to understand what happened. But the brutal truth is that it happened because of Ryan. He did not plan it, but he caused it by being drunk, aggressive, careless, and exactly the kind of man everyone had spent years excusing. The wedding night ended with Megan in a hospital bed, Ryan in a hallway begging people not to make this worse, my parents looking like they had aged 10 years, and me standing there with the folder still untouched in my car, realizing I had waited for them to build the lie, and Ryan had managed to set it on fire himself before I even opened the matchbox. For a few days, everyone stopped talking about the wedding as a love story and started calling it a tragedy. Ryan tried to use that tragedy as a shield almost immediately. He said he was grieving, that Megan was unstable, that nobody should bring up family drama right now, that the company discussion could wait, and that anyone who blamed him for the fall was trying to ruin him during the worst week of his life. That was Ryan at his purest. Even when the disaster came from his hands, he still tried to stand in the center of the sympathy. Megan did not defend him. That was new. After the hospital, she went to stay with her sister instead of going home with Ryan. And that was when I understood their marriage had not even lasted one full night before the truth started chewing through it. 2 weeks later, Ryan made his final mistake. He showed up at my parents' house for Sunday dinner with Megan, who looked pale, quiet, and hollow in a way that made even me feel something I did not want to feel. And instead of showing humility, he tried to turn the whole situation into proof that he needed family support. He said that after everything he and Megan had lost, he wanted to become stable, and he hoped Dad would consider making him a larger partner in the company so he could provide for his wife and rebuild their future. That was the moment I opened the folder. I did not shout. I did not call Megan names. I did not make some big speech about betrayal. I placed the fake invoices, bank records, signed repayment agreements, Megan's settlement admissions, Ryan's hidden account trail, the private investigator payment, the hotel photo summary, the pregnancy timeline questions, and the wedding hallway incident report on the dining room table. The room went quiet in a way I can still feel in my body, because for the first time in years, nobody could turn to my tone, my anger, my divorce, or my supposed bitterness. The paper was louder than all of us. Ryan tried to stand, but my father told him to sit down, and there was something in his voice that made even Ryan obey. Megan started crying, but nobody moved toward her, which was new because in my family tears usually worked like a remote control. This time, they did not. I explained everything in order, from the fake vendor to the affair, from the divorce settlement to the hidden account, from the stolen engagement ring, money, to the private investigator, from the hotel meetings to the suspicious pregnancy timeline, from the wedding fall to the attempt to use the loss as a reason to get into the company. My mother looked like she was aging with every page. My father looked devastated, but not shocked enough. That was the next twist. He already knew some of it. After my divorce, my father had quietly hired an outside accountant because he had noticed money missing and also noticed that I was carrying something I would not say. He had not confronted Ryan because some broken, hopeful part of him wanted to see if his son would confess before being cornered. Ryan never did. Then my father pulled out his own folder. Inside were updated company documents, a revised will, and a letter from his attorney confirming that Ryan had already been removed from any future ownership role 6 months earlier. My father had not been weak. He had been waiting too. Ryan's face changed when he realized the company had already closed its doors to him before he ever made his grand request. Megan looked at Ryan, then at the documents, then back at Ryan. And I watched her understand in real time that she had married a man who had promised future power he no longer had. Then my father asked one question that made the room even uglier. He asked whether the baby was Ryan's. Nobody had said that part out loud yet. Megan froze. Ryan looked at her too fast. That was enough. She tried to cry harder, but the crying had lost its authority, and when she said she did not know for sure, the whole room seemed to shrink around that sentence. I had heard enough people use uncertainty as a hiding place. My father stood up, took off his glasses, and told Ryan that he had stolen from his company, stolen from his brother, married into another lie, hurt his pregnant wife on their wedding night, and still somehow walked into that house asking for more. My mother whispered that she was going to be sick. Ryan started begging again, saying it was an accident, legal action would destroy him, Megan needed support. Dad's health could not handle a public scandal, and family should not destroy family. It was the same trick in a new costume. His consequences were suddenly everyone else's emergency. My father said the company would proceed legally. That sentence ended Ryan more than any shouting could have. The fallout did not happen like a movie, because real disasters are slower and meaner. There were lawyers, repayment demands, tax questions, business filings, family calls, relatives choosing sides, neighbors whispering, and months of conversations that felt like dragging a dead animal out of the walls after pretending for years that the smell was normal. Megan left Ryan not long after that, and I later found out she had been talking to Cole before the wedding, before the pregnancy announcement, and before she ever stood in that church pretending Ryan was the man who had saved her. Ryan called me once after she left, drunk and rambling that Megan had ruined his life. I almost laughed, but I did not give him the satisfaction of hearing emotion from me. I listened long enough to understand that he still saw himself as the betrayed one. Then I hung up. That was the last time we spoke. My parents are different now. My mother still cries over the son she wanted Ryan to be, not the son he actually became. And my father has gone quieter in a way that feels less weak than before, like the truth cost him something, but also gave him permission to stop pretending. People ask why I went to the wedding if I knew almost everything, and I know the honest answer does not make me sound kind. I went because I wanted them to finish the lie before I killed it. I wanted Ryan to marry her publicly, wanted Megan to walk into my parents' house as his wife and try to take more from my father, wanted the family to see the greed after the betrayal, and wanted there to be no room for anyone to call me jealous, bitter, unstable, or dramatic. That was cold. I know it was cold. But kindness had been weaponized against me for years, and by the time my brother married my ex-wife, I had learned that some people only understand consequences when they arrive with paperwork and witnesses. My family does not ask me to be the bigger person anymore. That phrase died at my parents' dining table under a stack of bank records, fake invoices, hotel photos, repayment agreements, and one wedding incident report nobody could explain away. I lost a wife, a brother, and the fake peace my family had been worshiping for years. But I gained something I did not know I needed. I gained the right to stop carrying people who kept stabbing me and calling the wound a family problem. Ryan married my ex-wife and begged me not to tell the family what I knew. For once, I let him beg long enough to believe silence might save him. Then I told them everything.